A young mom and hopeful influencer gets a devastating diagnosis. She's got pancreatic cancer, and the prognosis isn't good. Friends and family rally around her, raising thousands of dollars for her treatment, when the other shoe drops. It's all a scam. She never had cancer. In fact, she's pleaded guilty to defrauding her close friends and their family to the tune of $20,000. This is Scandal, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Gillespie. Most of us have a love-hate relationship with social media. There's, of course, the downside of doom scrolling, getting sucked into useless rabbit holes. We've all done it. But it's a great way to stay in touch with family and friends, or even reconnect with people we haven't seen in years. And that's what happened to Sydney Fink. After she became a mom, she got back in touch with a high school classmate, Haley Knight. They reignited their friendship, and all was well until Haley announced she had a cancer diagnosis. Being a good friend, Sydney stepped up, donating to Haley's GoFundMe page and even convincing her family to do the same. But there was one major problem here. Haley never had cancer. She wasn't even sick at all. According to Nevada prosecutors, she just pretended she was to steal thousands of dollars from unwitting victims and then use the money to pay for her bills and fuel her spending habits. Today's scandal takes us to Henderson, Nevada. It's a city just 15 minutes south of Las Vegas, and that's home to 33-year-old Haley Knight, wife and mother, and ultimately fake cancer patient. But before Haley concocted that shocking story, her scheme started in a different way. Now, at the top of the episode, I mentioned Haley's childhood friend, Sydney Fink. Sydney plays a large role in this case because she's what helped bring on the police investigation, eventual prosecution of Haley, and ultimately her plea. Haley and Sydney met, and they were friends years ago while attending Foothills High School in Henderson, Nevada. And like a lot of friends after high school, they went their separate ways. But it was social media that reconnected the pair, who started bonding a couple of years ago after they both became moms. According to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Sydney said she'd seen a few of Haley's posts after high school and saw that Haley was attempting to be an influencer. So when they started chatting, Sydney asked about all of this. Haley told her she was in fact an influencer and worked in a high-level position within the Four Seasons hotel chain. According to prosecutors, this is where the scheme started. Haley reportedly told Sydney she could get her discounts on fun trips, great places to stay at different Four Seasons resorts. She even allegedly sent Sydney a digital contract with Four Seasons stationery on it, but no trips were ever provided to Sydney or her family. Prosecutors say Haley went to great lengths to convince Sydney and her family that she really was part of the Four Seasons company and used multiple different phone numbers to pretend to be an employee. According to a Henderson Police Department affidavit, quote, Sydney stated for over a year she and her family had no idea they were being scammed due to the lies Haley was telling them. Sydney stated that each time the dates for a trip would be close, an excuse was made as to why the trip fell through and got canceled. But Haley's scamming went to a new level when she revealed she'd been diagnosed with cancer. To be clear, prosecutors say Haley never was actually diagnosed with cancer, but that's not what she told Sydney. She revealed to Sydney, and Sydney's entire family, by the way, that Haley had recently been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. But the scamming didn't stop there. Haley created a GoFundMe page to raise money for this alleged cancer treatment. That's where she took money from Sydney, her family, and complete strangers. In all, Haley reported she took home $20,192.16. She used the money to pay off her bills and just for personal expenses, literally for fun money. Sydney's mother told the Las Vegas Review-Journal, quote, I'm like 100% convinced she faked the cancer to take our attention off of her and the refunds, meaning the entire scheme involving the Four Seasons. Sydney went on to say, quote, and it worked because we believed her at this point and we were heartbroken for her. Sydney's sister, Corey Fink, also spoke to the Las Vegas Review-Journal. She said she donated $250 to Haley's cause and uprooted her entire life to live closer to Haley, who had convinced her she could help Corey to become an influencer. Corey said, quote, I do feel I lost a lot of my life. I had to leave behind my whole life in Utah, friends that I can't see the same way that I did, and my job and my apartment and things like that. All of this happened, by the way, between June 2023 and April 2024. But the Henderson police investigation into Haley began just this January in 2026, when Sydney came forward with all of these allegations. She explained everything that happened and offered up proof, screenshots where Haley admitted to it all. According to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Haley texted Sydney, quote, "I obviously took the Four Seasons money, but I promise you with every ounce of my being, I never took your property while with you." Haley admitted she never had pancreatic cancer as well. She texted her, quote, "The cervical stuff was real. Nothing with the pancreas was." Shortly after the investigation into Haley was opened, she was charged with felony theft between $5,000 and $25,000. She pleaded guilty to the charge just last month. As part of the plea deal, Haley agreed to pay back almost $19,000 worth of restitution. If she successfully does that and completes probation, she can withdraw her guilty plea and instead plead guilty to a misdemeanor theft instead of felony theft and receive credit for time served. All right, I've got some questions about all of that, the plea, a possible sentence, and even the ethics involving faking a cancer diagnosis. So let's bring on one of my all-time favorite guests. It's trial attorney Alexis Rosenberg. Alexis, great to see you. Thanks for coming on Scandal. And let's start with this, the charges, felony theft. Do you think that's justifiable, an appropriate charge for the allegations here?
Definitely. This is horrible. She's going around and she is telling everybody she has cancer when she doesn't. Actually, a very horrible type of cancer that has a very low survival rate. And she is getting people to feel sorry for her and give their hard-earned money to her.
Oh my God. I'm truly so shocked. I feel like every single person, every single viewer, whoever's involved in this, everyone knows someone who's affected by cancer, whether they themselves are a survivor. Everyone knows because it affects everyone legitimately. And when I'm reading about this story, my dad passed away a couple of years ago from cancer. And I'm like, the audacity of someone to say and want the sympathy and then stealing hard-earned money from people when she doesn't have it. I mean, do you think there could be additional charges too relating to all of this, like deception of some sort?
Well, I think the state has determined there's not going to be additional charges at this point, but it's just utterly disgusting. Like you said, people who are legitimately going through this and suffering, and not only the person that's actually suffering from the cancer, but their family that is having to go through this. And it also is very financially draining when a family has some sort of medical, event such as going through and being treated for cancer. So, I mean, I think it just really jumps out and people are seriously disturbed by it. But even more than that, the comments that were made was that she was saying it wasn't about the money. She wanted attention. I mean, I hope that the court had ordered some sort of mental health evaluation or requirement that was attached to the sentence, because it really does sound like this person has some mental health issues that are also attached to this possibly.
That was going to be one of my questions too, because I feel like just in the zeitgeist of our world, when we're talking about, Gypsy and her mother, there's this kind of phrase that everybody's talking about, which is Munchausen by proxy. In that case, it was the mother who made the daughter feel like, okay, I have cancer, whatever. That's by proxy part of it. But is it possible, if you're the defense attorney for her, to kind of go in and look at her psyche that maybe she actually thought she did have cancer? Is that a route that early on the defense might have taken?
I don't think that's the case, but they definitely would go into the mental health end. They may have brought up to kind of pull the heartstrings and say that really she wasn't defrauding these people for money, but we have a mental health issue that probably needs to be addressed here, because it seems like she didn't necessarily need the money and it wasn't really the money issue, but really she wanted attention. But there were comments from some of the victims that she was a sociopath, is the word that I believe that they used, and that she would continue to do this. And that's what I'm a little concerned about this sentence. It really doesn't seem harsh enough. Has she done this previously and not gotten caught? Is this really based on what they're sentencing her? Is this going to stop her from doing it? And my personal opinion is I don't think so. I don't think this was harsh enough. This really is egregious what she did to these victims.
Okay, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because as I was going through, I had to triple check what I was reading, and I was like, wait a minute, what she's pleading guilty to and what her possible sentence is, it doesn't seem right, in my opinion, for what she ended up doing and admitting that she did. So let's talk about the plea here. I guess, according to all of the sources that I've read, if she pays back the restitution of like around $20,000, pays it all back and everything, she can withdraw her plea of guilty as far as a felony and plead guilty to it being a misdemeanor, meaning it would be bumped down from the most severe of a felony to a misdemeanor. Can you explain that to me?
So is that unusual for like first time, their first time, which is, I think this is what, I don't think she has a prior
Yeah, I don't
record
think so.
for something of that nature, because you really don't want to mark, let's say someone made a mistake or they were in a bad place in their life, to, have them have a felony on their record, because it really can alter the course of your life with jobs and various things. So a lot of times the courts, if they believe that the person is going to learn from the situation and not do this again, will potentially offer that up. And then there's going to, I believe there are some sort of probation requirements that are also attached to that. So that means if she does mess up during that time, then that's going to be off the table. But in this case, because of the egregious nature, if I was the judge, I would not be open to that, because she was going around and she made multiple accounts. This isn't one account. This wasn't a one-off. She's targeting friends. I believe one of them was a close friend who was herself going through cancer. And it just seems to me that this is a complete disregard with intent to defraud for whatever the reasons that it was. If it wasn't monetary, it was for her own personal, making her feel good reasons. I don't think justify. I think that she needed a harsher sentence. And if I was the judge, I would have entered a harsher sentence. But I'm not the judge, so the judge can do whatever they want.
And so we had her plead guilty, or she did, and her upcoming sentencing is going to be in June, where she could face up to 5 years. You said, you don't think that that's harsh enough. What are your thoughts about all of that? Like, what sort of parameters do you think would be appropriate for something like this?
Well, so you brought up a very good point. She could face up to 5 years. Now, the court doesn't have to follow, in most courts, and every jurisdiction is slightly different, but most of the time they don't have to follow the suggested plea. They can say that they're going to go outside that and potentially sentence her to those 5 years. Generally, though, they are going to follow the suggested plea that's put before them. And so you're right, she could get 5 years. Do I think she needs 5 years? I don't necessarily think she needs 5 years, but the plea that's currently, I think that's a slap on the wrist. And I do definitely think that we do need some mental health parameters put in there to figure out why she feels like she needs this validation, and to teach her better stress relief, I guess, so that she can get that from other sources. But I think just simply saying to her that, all right, you pretty much stay out of trouble and pay back this money and we're just going to forget about it, I don't think, based on what the victims are saying, that's going to stop her from doing this in the future.
And I think that's the biggest thing here, right? We don't want a reoffense. We already have multiple victims to the tune of $20,000. People donated their hard-earned money to her. If she has essentially what you're saying, a slap on the wrist, what's to stop her from doing this again, especially if she gets it bumped down from a felony to a misdemeanor? And I guess part of that, I should specify, we talked about restitution just briefly, but she has to pay back close to this $20,000 price tag that she got. Go back and pay the people who, whatever they donated to her GoFundMe. And I kind of wonder about that, because to me, $20,000, it's a pretty penny. That's quite a lot of money. So for somebody just to take that out of their bank account and pay it immediately, I don't know that everybody has that in their bank account. It might take time. And what are the odds of her actually being able to pay this all back? Is there a timetable for that?
Usually what they're going to do is they're going to evaluate the finances, and then they could set up a payment plan for it. It stays. It doesn't go away until it's paid off. So there's usually a payment plan. But, another thing that we haven't really dove into is the whole GoFundMe, because remember, GoFundMe gets a percentage. And this kind of gets into, is there any obligation, not from a criminal standpoint, but from a civil standpoint, on GoFundMe and they have a bunch of disclaimers, but to make sure that these fraudulent accounts aren't up or have some sort of verification, because she opened up several accounts. It wasn't one account having to do with this. And this is going to be interesting as we're seeing more cases going against Meta and their obligation, as what is their obligation. So, but yeah, GoFundMe did get their percentage. I don't believe they're having to return that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you pointed that out because she received around $20,000. I think it was like $20,192 or something. I have it in the episode, the exact amount. But she only has to pay back $19,000 some, and that's because of the proceeds that GoFundMe got from putting on, this. And they did make their statement saying, we're not promoting this, we're here to help people, etc. But you brought up a good point in the civil side of things, because this defendant we have here, Haley Knight, she basically targeted a good friend of hers, her good friend's family, strangers too, but honestly, it seems a little bit worse to me if she's targeting somebody who is her friend and lying about pancreatic cancer to her friend and her friend's family. That to me, very, very outlandish. But do you think there's any sort of civil side that potentially her friend could have to sue her in that realm?
Yes, I mean, her friend could turn around and sue her for fraud for what she did. Now, remember, you can't do what's called double dip. So if the friend is fully compensated through the restitution, she can only get the differential. For instance, it may be, like you said, that she never actually pays back the friend, or she could go in and get it on the civil end and not have to ask for the restitution. So that is an option. Is the likelihood the friend going to do that? Probably not, especially with the order of restitution, but it is a possibility. But like I said, the real question, which is going to be interested, is what is the obligation under that GoFundMe? Because we are seeing a lot in other areas of, you can't just slap up a website and say, put a bunch of disclaimers and say, oh, listen, I'm just a platform. So it is, what is the obligation that they have to prevent this from happening?
And this isn't the first time I've seen something like this. My show is called Scandal, after all. I've seen other people face fake diagnoses, people scamming other people saying that they're pregnant, but they're not actually pregnant. This, I'm not going to say it's common, but it has happened before and does. So I wonder if this is maybe the start for places you talked about, Meta, maybe GoFundMe, kind of what's ahead in the realm of these scammers. And again, I'm thinking about her friend and just the trauma, because if one of my friends came to me and said, I have cancer, I would say, I'll help you as much as I can. I'm going to be there to support you financially if I can, but also just being a friend, mentally being there. I will go with you to your appointments. I will be here as a voice to listen, if you need to vent, whatever it may be. So the trust issues that the friend has, I wonder if that could kind of lead into her wanting to do the civil side, or if she maybe wants to step back. And I guess I'm going off on a tangent. Let's talk about the plea a little bit more. Okay, so the plea deal, why do you think she ended up taking that? I kind of have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but why do you think the plea deal rather than actually going to trial?
That's a sweetheart deal, right, Sierra? Yeah. I mean, come on, if you were her, would you turn that down? I don't think you could get any sweeter than that. I mean, if she had a lawyer, that was great lawyering. I'm assuming she did. So, I mean, that was a sweetheart. She can't really get much better than that. The evidence is pretty strong to support she did what the allegations are saying that she did. So I don't think she had much of a defense. Who wouldn't take that deal?
That's why I was kind of surprised that prosecutors were like, okay, yeah, we're going to have this plea deal. Here we go. Because according to the court documents and everything that I've seen, she has text messages where she fesses up to her friend and says, like, no, I never had cancer. And she's like, admitting basically to everything. So we have that. If we can go in and look at her, medical records, you weren't diagnosed with cancer. You didn't work for the Four Seasons. Okay, that's pretty black and white if we have the paperwork right there. So for her defense, sweetheart deal, I happen to agree with you about all that. But for the justice, I don't know if it's there. So I guess that's the last question that I'm going to ask you. We kind of talked about, will she reoffend? What's ahead because of the sentencing and all of that? But I guess we're here to talk about justice. Do you think in this case justice is served?
So I always hate this question because I think ultimately whether justice was served is really a question that has to be answered by the individual victim. Yeah. I think that is really, it's whether that victim thinks justice was served. I do think personally that there is a high likelihood in some form, maybe not through GoFundMe, that she will continue and do this later on in life unless she gets counseling. But I don't, justice is served is something that is a question that only the victims can answer.
My thoughts go out to the victims too, who may have trust issues in the future. I know that I would. I'm hoping that she doesn't reoffend, that our defendant here does seek some sort of mental health treatment to kind of come to terms with why she would have done what she did. She's pleaded guilty, so she admitted she did it. This is just one of those crazy. It's a scandal, let's just say, a scandalous case. Alexis Rosenberg, thank you for coming on today and walking us through it.
Thank you for having me, as always. I always have so much fun.
Haley is set to be sentenced on June 24th, but before I wrap up today's episode, I want to include a statement from GoFundMe about the incident. They made this statement to People magazine. It reads, quote, GoFundMe has zero tolerance for bad actors who seek to take advantage of the generosity of others. The organizer's account has been banned from using our platform for any future fundraisers. Being a safe and trusted place to give and receive help is our top priority, and we work with law enforcement investigations of those accused of wrongdoing. And that is where today's episode of Scandal leaves us for now. If you like what you saw and want to see more or connect with me on social media, you can find me on places like Instagram at Sierra Gillespie. Thanks for watching today's episode of Scandal. As always, I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.